camera clicked. The guard didn't move. Behind the palace gates, whispers spread like wildfire through the ranks. Something had happened that morning. Something the press would never print. A member of the royal family had approached. The guard had refused, not out of disrespect, but because of something deeper, something older than protocol itself. Within hours, the entire regiment knew a line had been crossed. A choice had been made. And when Princess Anne arrived just moments later, that same guard did something that would change everything. The question wasn't why he refused. The question was, what did he know that the rest of the world didn't? The morning began like any other at Windsor Castle. Guardsman James Hartley stood at his post, shoulders back, eyes forward. The weight of his bearskin hat pressed down on his skull. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard. He had been standing there for 40 minutes. 20 more to go before the change of guard. He loved this job. Not for the tourists or the photographs, but for the history. Every stone beneath his boots had witnessed centuries of British monarchy. Kings had walked here. Queens had wept here. Battles had been planned within these walls. If you're captivated by stories like this, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more to uncover about the hidden moments that shaped the royal family. James had joined the Grenadier Guards 3 years ago. His grandfather had served before him. His great-grandfather, too. It was in his blood. The discipline, the silence, the unwavering commitment to crown and country. He took pride in being invisible, in being a statue when the world demanded movement. But this morning felt different. The air carried a strange tension. Other guards had mentioned it during the brief handover. Something was happening inside the palace. Meetings that weren't on the schedule. Cars arriving through back entrances. Senior officers speaking in hushed tones. James kept his eyes forward. He had learned not to ask questions. A good guard observed everything and revealed nothing. Then he heard the footsteps, sharp heels against stone, confident, purposeful, coming from the west wing. James didn't turn his head. He didn't need to. Years of training taught him to recognize people by their walk. These footsteps belonged to someone who expected the world to move aside. The figure appeared in his peripheral vision. A woman in a tailored coat, blonde hair perfectly styled despite the morning breeze. She walked with the assurance of someone accustomed to deference. Camilla, the queen consort. She approached his post directly, not walking past as most royals did, but coming toward him. Stopping just 3 feet away, James felt his heart rate increase. This was unusual. Royals typically ignored the guards. They were meant to be part of the architecture, seen but not acknowledged. "Excuse me," Camilla said. Her voice carried that particular upper-class accent, polite but firm. James didn't respond. Protocol was clear. Guards on duty did not speak unless addressed by a superior officer or in case of emergency. "I need you to step aside," she continued. "I'm going through this entrance." The entrance behind James led to the Queen's private corridor. A passageway rarely used, heavily restricted. Even senior royals needed specific authorization to use it. James remained perfectly still. Camilla's expression shifted. Surprise flickered across her features. She was clearly unused to being ignored. "Did you hear me?" Her tone sharpened. "Step aside." James had received his orders that morning. Guard the entrance. No exceptions. No deviations. The order had come from the top, from the king's private secretary himself, but those orders hadn't mentioned what to do if a member of the royal family demanded entry. Sweat began to form beneath his collar. This was the nightmare scenario every guard feared. Caught between protocol and pressure, between duty and diplomacy, Camilla took a step closer. "This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this." Watch. James could see tourists gathering at the fence. Phones were coming out. Cameras were turning in their direction. Whatever happened next would likely be recorded, shared, analyzed. His mind raced. He thought of his grandfather's words. When in doubt, a guard's loyalty is to his orders, not to personalities. He remained motionless. Camilla's face flushed. I will be speaking to your commanding officer about this." She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking angrily against the stone. James exhaled slowly. His hands were trembling inside his white gloves. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his military career? 10 minutes passed. They felt like hours. Then he heard different footsteps, lighter, quicker, with a rhythm that suggested purpose without arrogance. Princess. Anne rounded the corner. She was dressed in her military uniform. The collar of her navy jacket bore the insignia of her regiments. She walked like someone who had spent decades earning respect rather than expecting it. She reached James's post and paused. Their eyes met for just a fraction of a second. In that brief moment, James saw something unexpected. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even gratitude. Anne gave the slightest nod. So subtle that a camera wouldn't catch it, but James felt it like a trunclap. Then, without being asked, without any ceremony, Princess Anne stepped back 3 paces. She bowed her head, not to James personally, but to what he represented, to the duty he was upholding, to the orders he had refused to break. James felt his chest tighten. Emotion surged through him. In his entire career, he had never experienced anything like this. A senior royal, the Princess Royal herself. Acknowledging his service in this way, Anne straightened, gave him one more brief look, then walked past. She didn't try to enter the restricted corridor. She took the long route around, the proper route, without complaint. By noon, every guard in the regiment had heard what happened, but nobody knew why Camilla had wanted that entrance, and nobody understood why Princess Anne had treated a refusal with such profound respect. James would soon discover that what seemed like a simple moment of protocol was actually something far more significant. The military hadn't just chosen a side that day. They had sent a message. Asterisk. The summons came 3 hours after. James's shift ended. He was in the barracks, still in his uniform, trying to process what had happened. Other guards kept glancing at him, some with curiosity, others with concern. Word spread fast in military circles. Hartley, Sergeant Major Thompson, stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable. "Colonel wants to see you." Now. James's stomach dropped. This was it. The reprimand. Possibly worse. Refusing a royal, even politely, could end a career. He followed Thompson through the corridors. Their boots echoed against polished floors. Neither man spoke. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. Colonel Harrison's office sat in the oldest part of the barracks. The walls held portraits of former commanders dating back to the 1600s, men who had served kings and queens through wars, scandals, and revolutions. Thompson knocked twice and opened the door. Colonel Harrison stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He was a tall man, late 50s, with silver hair and a bearing that commanded instant respect. He had served in the Falklands, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. He wore his decorations sparingly, but everyone knew his record. "Guardsman Hartley," he said without turning, "close the door." James did as instructed. His heart hammered in his chest. Harrison remained at the window for a long moment. When he finally turned, his expression was serious, but not angry. "Tell me what happened this morning," he said. "In your own words." James recounted the incident. He kept his tone neutral, factual. He mentioned Camilla's request, his refusal, Princess Anne's response. He left nothing out. Harrison listened without interruption. When James finished, the colonel walked to his desk and sat down. "You followed your orders," Harrison said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, sir." "Even when pressured by a member of the royal family?" "Yes, sir." Harrison nodded slowly. "Do you know why those orders were given?" James hesitated. "No, sir. I don't question orders." "Good answer." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "But you're going to need to understand this one. Because what happened today is going to have consequences. And you deserve to know why." He pulled a folder from his drawer. Inside were several documents. He selected one and slid it across the desk. James picked it up. It was a security briefing. Dated from the previous week? The details outlined a change in access protocols for certain royal family members. Effective immediately, some corridors required additional clearance. The corridor James had been guarding was on the list. 3 weeks ago, Harrison began. Palace security identified a potential breach. Nothing confirmed, but enough concern to tighten protocols. The Queen's private corridor, Harrison continued, leads to several sensitive areas. The document archive, the secure communications room, the King's private study. I understand, sir. What you may not understand is that these new protocols weren't universally popular. Some members of the family felt the restrictions were excessive, unnecessary. Harrison paused, choosing his words carefully. The Queen Consort in particular has expressed frustration with what she calls outdated security measures. She believes her position should grant her unrestricted access. James began to see the larger picture. This morning, Harrison said, was a test. Whether intentional or not, your encounter with Her Majesty became a statement. The military follows its orders, not preferences, not assumptions of privilege, and Princess Anne, sir. Harrison's expressions softened slightly. The Princess Royal served in the military herself. She understands chain of command. She respects it. What she did this morning was acknowledge that respect. He stood and walked back to the window. There's something else you should know. Within an hour of the incident, I received 3 phone calls. One from the Queen Consort's private secretary, demanding your immediate reassignment. One from the King's office, asking for a full report. And one from Princess Anne herself. James felt his pulse quicken. Princess Anne called personally? He asked. She did. She wanted to ensure that no disciplinary action would be taken against you. She specifically stated that you had performed your duty admirably and should be commended, not punished. Harrison turned back to face James. Guardsman Hartley, you're not in trouble. In fact, you're being put forward for commendation. But I need you to understand something. The royal family is not a united front. There are factions, loyalties, old wounds that haven't healed. James had heard rumors, of course. Every guard had whispers about tension between Queen Camilla and other family members. Stories about Princess Anne's cool relationship with her brother's wife. But hearing it confirmed by a superior officer made it real. Your job, Harrison continued, is to serve the crown, not individuals, not personalities. The institution itself. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Harrison studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Good, because this won't be the last time you're caught in the middle. The palace is changing. New influences. New agendas. The military is one of the few institutions that still operates on merit and protocol rather than politics. He walked James to the door. One more thing, Harrison said quietly. The video footage from this morning has been reviewed. Several tourists captured the incident on their phones. We're monitoring social media. If this story gains traction, you may face media attention. What should I say, sir? Nothing. You say absolutely nothing. Let your actions speak. They already have. James left the office with his mind spinning. He had joined the guards to serve quietly, to be part of something larger than himself. Now he was at the center of a royal drama he barely understood. Back in the barracks, other guards approached him with questions. He deflected them all. But he couldn't escape the feeling that something significant was unfolding. That evening, he called his grandfather. I heard the old man said before James could speak. News travels fast in the regiment. Did I do the right thing? James asked. His grandfather was quiet for a moment. Let me tell you something, he finally said. In 1982, I was posted at Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne was leaving for an engagement. Her car had a mechanical problem. She was going to be late. Some fool suggested she take a vehicle from the motor pool without proper authorization. She refused. Said rules existed for a reason. Made her wait for her own car to be fixed. That's who she is. James listened. The royal family, his grandfather continued, is made up of people. Some understand duty. Some understand privilege. You serve the former today. Remember that. The call ended, but the words stayed with James. That night, lying in his bunk, he replayed the morning in his mind. Camilla's anger, Anne's bow, Harrison's words. He thought about what it meant to serve. Not just to follow orders, but to represent something bigger. Standards, honor, integrity. Outside, Windsor Castle stood silent against the night sky. Within its walls, conversations were happening. Decisions were being made. Alliances were being tested. James didn't know it yet, but his refusal to move had set something in motion. Something that would reveal just how deep the divisions within the royal family truly ran. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. A tourist from Germany had captured the entire exchange. The footage showed Camilla approaching James, her gestures becoming more animated. Her eventual departure, and then minutes later, Princess Anne's arrival and her subtle bow, the internet exploded. Hashtags began trending. Royal commentators analyzed every frame. Body language experts offered their opinions. The divide between those who supported Camilla and those who admired Anne became a digital battleground. James watched his phone light up with notifications. Friends from school, distant relatives, even his old rugby coach. Everyone wanted to know the story behind the video. He turned the phone off at morning formation. Sergeant Major Thompson addressed the guards. "I don't need to tell you that recent events have attracted attention," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You will not speak to the press. You will not comment on social media. You will not discuss internal matters with anyone outside this regiment. Is that clear?" "Yes, Sergeant Major," they responded in unison. "Good, because the eyes of the nation are on us, and we will demonstrate what it means to serve with dignity." The day's assignments were posted. James expected to be moved to a less visible position. Instead, he was assigned to the state entrance, one of the most prestigious posts in the palace. He caught Thompson's eye. The sergeant major gave him an almost imperceptible nod. The message was clear. The regiment was standing behind him. At noon, James took his position. The state entrance saw frequent royal traffic. Members of the family used it regularly. Staff moved through with documents and correspondence. It was impossible to be invisible here. 20 minutes into his shift, a black car pulled up. The door opened and Princess Anne stepped out. She was alone, unusual for a royal of her status. No aide, no security detail visible, just in a simple blue dress and pearls. She walked toward the entrance. As she approached, she slowed her pace. James remained at attention, eyes forward, but he could feel her looking at him. "Guardsman," she said softly. It wasn't a question or command, just an acknowledgement. James didn't respond. Protocol didn't allow it. But something passed between them in that moment, a mutual understanding of duty, and entered the palace without another word. The afternoon brought different visitors. A sleek Mercedes arrived. 2 aides emerged first, then Queen Camilla. She wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Her expression was impossible to read. She walked past James without a glance, as if he didn't exist. One of her aides, however, paused. He was young, probably mid-20s, with the polished look of someone who had attended the right schools and knew the right people. "You're the guard from yesterday," the aide said quietly. Positioning himself just outside James's sightline, the one who caused all that trouble, James said nothing. "You should know," the aide continued, "that Her Majesty is not pleased. There will be consequences for embarrassing her in public." The threat hung in the air. James remained perfectly still, but his mind was racing. Was this an official warning? Or just an aide overstepping his authority? The aide smirked and walked away. Evening came. James's shift ended. As he walked back to the barracks, he noticed something unusual. Several senior officers were gathered near the command building. Their conversation looked intense. In the mess hall, the other guards were subdued. Usually, dinner was filled with banter and stories. Tonight, people ate in near silence. Finally, One of the younger guards, Bennett, spoke up. Did anyone else get questioned today? Heads turned. Questioned about what? Another guard asked. About yesterday. About the incident. Some civilian came by. Said he was from the palace administration. Asked me what I knew about Guardsman Hartley. About whether he had any political views. Any connections to media? James felt ice in his stomach. What did you tell him? He asked. Nothing. Said I didn't know you well. But it was weird. Like they were building a file. Others began sharing similar experiences. Guards being pulled aside. Asked casual questions that felt anything but casual. A pattern was emerging. Someone was investigating James. That night, Colonel Harrison called him back to his office. The colonel looked tired. More tired than James had ever seen him. Sit down, Harrison said. James sat. I'm going to be direct with you, Harrison began. There are people within the palace administration who want you removed. Not just from your current post. From the guards entirely. James felt his world tilting. On what grounds, sir? They don't need grounds. Not really. They can claim you're a security risk. That you've shown poor judgment. That you're not suited for royal duty. It's all subjective. But I followed orders. I know. And that's precisely the problem. You followed orders that certain people didn't want followed. Harrison pulled out another document. This is a transfer request. It came from the Queen Consort's office this afternoon. They want you moved to a training facility in Scotland. Effective immediately. Scotland. Thousands of miles from Windsor. From London? From anywhere that mattered? Is it an order, sir? Harrison shook his head. Not yet. I've pushed back. So have others. But the pressure is mounting. He leaned forward. James, you need to understand what's happening here. This isn't about you personally. It's about control. About who sets the rules within the palace. The Queen Consort is consolidating her influence. She wants staff and security who answer to her first. People who won't question her access or her authority. Harrison sighed. The king is caught between his wife and his family. Between tradition and change. He's trying to maintain peace. But that often means not taking sides. What about Princess Anne? Princess Anne has made her position clear. She's fighting this transfer. But she can only do so much. She's not the monarch. Her influence has limits. James absorbed this information. Everything he'd believed about royal unity was crumbling. What should I do, sir? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. You have 3 options. 1. Accept the transfer. Go to Scotland. Keep your head down. Your career continues, just far from here. 2. Resign. Leave the guards on your own terms. No controversy. No drama. Or 3. Stay and fight. Refuse the transfer. Force them to make it official. Make them show their hand. What do you recommend? I can't make that decision for you. But I can tell you this. If you leave, they win. If you stay, you become a symbol. For better or worse. James thought about his grandfather. About the generations of his family who had served. About what it meant to stand for something. I'll stay, he said quietly. Harrison nodded. I thought you might. Understand that this won't be easy. You'll face scrutiny. Pressure. They'll look for any mistake. Any excuse to prove they were right about you? I understand, sir. Good. Because starting tomorrow, you're being assigned to the most visible post we have. The King's Guard outside Buckingham Palace. If they want to remove you, they'll have to do it in front of the entire world. James left the office with a mixture of fear and determination. Walking back through the darkened grounds, he passed the Queen's corridor, the one he had guarded, the one that had started everything. A light was on in one of the upper windows. A silhouette moved behind the curtain. James couldn't tell who it was, but he had the distinct feeling he was being watched. The battle lines were being drawn, not with weapons or declarations, but with assignments and influence and quiet pressure. The Royal Guard had chosen its side. Now the question was whether that choice would stand. The morning James arrived at Buckingham Palace, Protesters lined the street, not protesters against the monarchy. Against him, a small group, maybe 20 people, held signs. Respect the Queen Consort. Guards should serve, not judge. One sign simply read, Fire Hartley. James stepped out of the transport vehicle and walked past them. Their shouts followed him to the gate. Inside, the atmosphere was different than at Windsor. Buckingham Palace was the public face of the monarchy. Every movement here was calculated. Every guard was on display. Sergeant Williams met him at the entrance. Hartley, she said. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, one of the few female officers in the guards. Welcome to the circus, ma'am. You've caused quite a stir, she said, leading him through the corridors. Half the country thinks you're a hero. The other half thinks you're insubordinate. Personally, I don't care either way. I care whether you can do your job. I can, ma'am. We'll see. You're on the front gate today. Maximum visibility. Maximum pressure. If you crack, everyone will see it. She stopped and turned to face him. A word of advice. The cameras never stop. The tourists never leave. Every twitch, every blink, every breath is captured and analyzed. Some guards can't handle it. They fold under the scrutiny. Don't be one of them. James nodded. Good, your shift starts in 10 minutes. Make us proud. The front gate of Buckingham Palace was exactly as daunting as James had imagined. Hundreds of tourists crowded the fence. Cameras flashed constantly. Children waved. Adults tried to make the guards react. James took his position and became stone. The first hour was manageable. The novelty of standing still wore off for most tourists. They took their photos and moved on. The second hour brought different challenges. Man in his 60s approached the fence. Well-dressed, confident, he pulled out his phone and began. Recording. Guardsman Hartley, he called out. Do you believe Queen Camilla should have the same access as other senior royals? James stared straight ahead. Guardsman Hartley, do you think Princess Anne deserves more respect than the Queen Consort? Other tourists turned to watch. More phones came out. Is it true you refused a direct order from Her Majesty? Do you think that's appropriate behavior for someone sworn to serve the crown? The questions continued, each one designed to provoke a response. James gave them nothing. Eventually, palace security escorted the man away, but the damage was done. The video would be online within minutes. By midday, James's legs ached. The sun beat down on his bearskin hat. Sweat ran down his back, but he maintained his position. Then a limousine pulled up to the gate. The window rolled down. Queen Camilla sat in the back seat. She looked directly at James. For a long moment, their eyes met. James saw something in her expression. Not anger anymore. Something colder. Calculation. The window rolled up. The car moved on, but James understood the message. This wasn't over. His shift ended at 3. As he walked back inside, Sergeant Williams was waiting. You survived, she said. Yes, ma'am. Barely. You're trending on social media again. The video of that journalist questioning you has 500,000 views already. James closed his eyes. Don't, Williams said sharply. Don't let it get to you. That's what they want. They want you rattled, uncertain, second-guessing yourself. Who's they, ma'am? Williams hesitated. The people who think the military should bend to political pressure. The people who believe loyalty should be personal rather than institutional. She handed him a bottle of water. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be worse. She was right. The next morning, James arrived to find the protest had tripled in size. The signs were more aggressive. The chants were louder, but there was a counter-protest too. Another group, larger than the first, held different signs. Support our guards. Duty over politics. Anne knows best. The two groups shouted at each other across the palace gates. Police formed a barrier between them. James walked through the chaos to his post, inside the palace. Staff moved with unusual tension. Conversations stopped when guards passed. Doors closed quickly. Something was happening in the private quarters at his post. James noticed increased activity. More cars arriving. Senior officials rushing in and out. Whatever was being decided, it was happening today. Around noon, Princess Anne's car arrived. She stepped out looking composed as always. But James noticed tension in her shoulders. The way she moved a bit faster than usual, she walked past his position, paused, then did something unexpected. She turned and addressed him directly. "Thank you for your service, guardsman." 5 simple words, spoken clearly enough for tourists to hear, for cameras to record. James's throat tightened. "Ma'am," he managed. Anne walked inside. The internet exploded again. Princess Anne's public acknowledgement of James became instant news. Royal commentators debated what it meant. Was it support? Defiance? A statement against her sister-in-law? That evening, Colonel Harrison called. "Pack a bag," he said. "You're being reassigned." James's heart sank. "Scotland, sir?" "No, Sandringham, the king's private estate. You're being placed on personal protection detail." James was confused. "I don't understand. Is that a promotion or a punishment?" Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I'm not sure. It could be both. You're being removed from public view, but you're also being placed in direct service to the king. It's either a reward or they're keeping you close to control you." "When do I leave?" "Tomorrow morning, early, before the media catches wind." "What about the protests?" "Not your concern anymore." Hartley, listen to me. Sandringham is different. It's the king's private refuge. You'll see things there. Hear things. The family lets their guard down away from London. Whatever you witness, you keep to yourself. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good." And Hartley, watch yourself. You're walking into the heart of the storm. That night, James couldn't sleep. He packed his bags mechanically. His mind kept returning to Princess Anne's words, "Thank you for your service." It felt like both validation and warning. Early the next morning, the car arrived. James loaded his gear and climbed in. As they pulled away from Buckingham Palace, he looked back at the gates where he'd stood. The protesters were already gathering for another day. The drive to Sandringham took 3 hours. The landscape changed from urban sprawl to countryside. Rolling fields, ancient trees. The kind of England tourists imagined but rarely saw. Sandringham House appeared in the distance. A sprawling estate of red brick and white stone, beautiful but imposing. The car pulled up to the security entrance. A guard checked James's identification and waved them through. Colonel Winters met him at the staff building. He was older than Harrison, with the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in service. "Guardsman Hartley," Winters said. "Welcome to Sandringham. I trust you understand the sensitivity of this assignment." "Yes, sir." "Good, because starting tomorrow, you'll be part of the king's personal protection team. You'll be in close proximity to the royal family during their private time. What you see here stays here. What you hear here stays here. No exceptions." "I understand, sir." Winters studied him. "Do you?" "Because the situation you're walking into is more complicated than you realize. The king and queen consort are both here. Princess Anne arrives tomorrow, and there are tensions that even we don't fully understand." He led James to his quarters, a small but comfortable room in the staff wing. "Briefing at 0600 tomorrow." And Hartley, "Sir. The reason you're here, the real reason, is because the king requested you personally. He wants to meet the guard who followed his orders instead of his wife's requests. That should tell you everything about how complicated this situation has become." Winters left. James sat on the bed, his mind reeling. The king had requested him, personally. Outside his window, Sandringham's grounds stretched into the darkness. Somewhere in the main house, conversations were happening. Decisions were being made. James had thought his refusal to move was a simple matter of following orders. He was beginning to realize it was the opening move in a much larger game. And tomorrow, he would finally understand what side everyone was really on. The briefing at 0600 was unlike anything James had experienced. Colonel Winters stood before a small group of guards. All of them hand-picked. All of them trusted. "Gentlemen," Winters began, "you are the innermost circle of protection. You will see the royal family in their private moments. You will hear conversations not meant for public ears. Your discretion is not optional. It is absolute." He pointed to a map of the estate. "King rises at 7. He takes tea in the morning room. Queen Camilla typically joins him at 8. Princess Anne, when she's here, prefers breakfast in her own quarters. You will maintain positions at designated checkpoints. You will be invisible, but vigilant." Winters paused and looked directly at James. "Guardsman Hartley, you will be stationed outside the king's study. It's a sensitive position. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because the king has specifically requested that you be there during his morning meetings." The other guards glanced at James, some with curiosity, others with envy. After the briefing, an older guard named Patterson approached him. "You're the one from the video," Patterson said. "Yes." Patterson nodded slowly. "I've been here 15 years. I've served 3 monarchs, and I've never seen the family this divided, sir. You'll see soon enough. Just remember, we serve the crown, not the politics. No matter how messy it gets." At 7:30, James took his position outside the king's study. The corridor was quiet. Paintings of former royals lined the walls. The morning light filtered through tall windows. At precisely 8 o'clock, as the study door opened, King Charles stepped out. He looked older than his photographs suggested. Lines creased his face. His movements carried the weight of his new role. He noticed James and stopped. "Guardsman." "Hartley," the king said. James snapped to attention. "Your Majesty?" "At ease." The king stepped closer. "I wanted to meet you. To thank you personally." James wasn't sure how to respond. "What you did at Windsor," Charles continued, "was follow your orders. That should be unremarkable. But in today's climate, it was an act of integrity, one that hasn't gone unnoticed. I was simply doing my duty, sir." "Yes, exactly." The king's expression was difficult to read. Sad, perhaps, or disappointed. That's become rarer than it should be. Footsteps approached from the corridor. Queen Camilla appeared, dressed for a day in the country. Her eyes landed on James and hardened. "Charles," she said coolly, "we're late for the estate tour." Of course, the king gave James a brief nod and walked away with his wife. But before they turned the corner, James heard Camilla's voice, low but clear. "Really, Charles? Having him here is provocative. You know that." The king's response was too quiet to hear. James remained at his post, his mind racing. The king's words had been kind, but they'd also been sad. As if integrity was something Charles admired, but could no longer fully support. An hour later, Princess Anne arrived. James heard her car before he saw her. The familiar sound of her no-nonsense arrival. Quick footsteps. No entourage. She came down the corridor alone, dressed in riding clothes. When she saw James, she smiled. Just slightly. Just enough. "Guardsman Hartley." "Good to see you here, ma'am. How are you finding Sandringham?" It was a genuine question, not small talk. James sensed she actually wanted to know. "It's an honor to serve here, ma'am." Anne studied him for a moment. "You've been through quite an ordeal these past weeks. All because you followed orders." "I don't regret it, ma'am." "Good, you shouldn't." She glanced toward the study door. "Is my brother in?" "He left about an hour ago." "Estate toured with Her Majesty?" Something flickered in Anne's eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or resignation. Of course he did. She started to leave, then paused. "Hartley, may I give you some advice?" "Please, ma'am. This family loyalty is complicated. People will try to make you choose sides. They'll pressure you, manipulate you, promise you things, or threaten consequences. Don't listen to any of it. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Follow your orders. Serve the institution. Let the individuals sort themselves out." "Yes, ma'am." Anne walked away, leaving James with more questions than answers. The rest of the morning passed quietly. James stood at his post, observing the rhythm of the household. Then, around noon, raised voices came from the morning room. James couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. An argument between the king and Queen Camilla. Other staff members hurried past, pretending not to hear. But everyone knew. Arguments at Sandringham were rare. The estate was supposed to be a refuge from palace drama. The voices stopped suddenly. A door slammed. Moments later, Camilla appeared in the corridor. Her face was flushed. She walked quickly, not looking at anyone. One of her aides rushed to keep up. James heard fragments of their conversation. Can't believe he's siding with her, and always gets what she wants. We need to speak to the press. Office. They disappeared around the corner. An hour later, Colonel Winters summoned James to his office. Close the door, Winters said. He looked troubled, sir. There's been a development. Queen Camilla has formally complained about your presence here. She claims your assignment to Sandringham is inappropriate. Given the public controversy, James felt his stomach drop. Demanding you be removed from the king's protection. Detail, immediately, and the king. Winters sighed. The king is caught in the middle. He values your service, but he's trying to maintain peace with his wife. He's asked me to handle the situation discreetly. What does that mean, sir? It means I'm giving you a choice. You can accept a transfer to a different post. No scandal. No media. A quiet resolution. Or you can request a meeting with the king to appeal the decision. James thought about Princess Anne's advice. Serve the institution. Let the individuals sort themselves out. I'll accept the transfer, sir. Where am I going? Winters looked almost relieved. Windsor Castle. Back to where this started? You'll be on regular rotation. No special assignments. No controversy. When do I leave? Tomorrow morning, James nodded. It felt like defeat, but it also felt right. He wasn't here to fight political battles. He was here to serve. There's one more thing, Winters said quietly. Princess Anne has requested to see you before you leave. Tonight, 8 o'clock. The library. At 8 o'clock precisely, James arrived at the library. The room was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A fireplace crackling with warmth. The smell of old leather and wood polish. Princess Anne sat in a wing-back chair, reading. She looked up when James entered. Guardsman Hartley. Please sit. James sat awkwardly. Royals didn't typically socialize with guards. I heard about your transfer, Anne said. I tried to intervene, but my brother is in a difficult position. I understand, ma'am, do you? Anne set down her book. I wonder if any of us truly understand what's happening. My brother became king at a time when the monarchy faces unprecedented challenges. He wants to modernize, to make the institution relevant, but he's also trying to please a wife who has very different ideas about what that means. She stood and walked to the window. Camilla sees herself as a modernizing force, someone who can connect the monarchy to ordinary people. And in some ways, she's right, but she's also impatient with tradition, with protocol, with the very things that make the monarchy worth preserving. James listened, unsure if he should speak. What happened at Windsor, Anne continued, was more than a guard following orders. It was a statement about what this institution stands for. Rules that apply to everyone. Standards that don't bend for convenience. And my sister-in-law sees that as an attack on her. She turned back to James. You're being sent away because you represent something she can't control. And that terrifies her more than you can imagine.
Al, what should I do, ma'am?
Anne smiled sadly. Keep being you. Keep following your orders. Keep representing the best of what the guards stand for. The rest of us will figure out our mess, eventually. She picked up a small box from the table beside her chair. It belonged to my father, Prince Philip. He gave it to me years ago. Told me to pass it on to someone who understood duty. She handed James the box. Inside was a medal, simple, unadorned, with an inscription, for service above self. I can't accept this, ma'am. You already have. Consider it a reminder. When the politics get overwhelming, when people try to make you doubt yourself, remember what you stand for. James held the box carefully. He felt the weight of what she was giving him. Not just the medal, but her trust. "Thank you, ma'am," and nodded. "Now go, before someone sees us and creates another scandal." James left the library with tears in his eyes. The next morning, he departed Sandringham. As his car pulled away, he looked back at the estate. Somewhere in that grand house, the royal family was sorting out their conflicts, making their alliances, fighting their battles. But James wasn't part of that anymore. He was going back to Windsor, back to doing the job he'd signed up for, and somehow that felt like victory enough. 6 months passed. James returned to Windsor and settled into routine. The media attention faded. The protests stopped. Life returned to the familiar rhythm of duty. But the royal family never quite recovered. The tension between Queen Camilla and Princess Anne became impossible to hide. At public events, they stood on opposite sides of the king. At private gatherings, they avoided each other entirely. The press noticed. Royal commentators analyzed every photograph, every gesture, every seating arrangement. The narrative became clear. The monarchy was divided. James heard the gossip in the barracks. Guards who had served at various royal residences shared stories of arguments behind closed doors, of staff choosing sides, of a family fracturing under the weight of competing visions. He tried to stay out of it, to focus on his duty, but his name still came up occasionally in royal circles, usually followed by knowing looks. One morning in late autumn, James was assigned to the Queen's corridor again. The same post where everything had started. He took his position, feeling the strange symmetry of it all. The morning was quiet. Tourists were few this time of year. The changing leaves created a golden carpet across the castle grounds. Then he heard familiar footsteps. Princess Anne appeared, dressed in her military uniform. She was attending a regimental event later that day. She saw James and stopped. "Guardsman Hartley," she said. "Still here, I see?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good."
Hey!
She paused, as if considering something. "Walk with me." It was highly unusual, but James knew better than to question a royal order. They walked through the corridors, Anne setting a brisk pace. "I want you to understand something," Anne said. "What happened between you and Camilla wasn't really about you. It was about power, about who gets to define what the monarchy becomes." "I'm not sure I follow, ma'am." Anne stopped at a window overlooking the castle grounds. "My brother loves his wife, but he's also the king, and those two roles don't always align. Camilla wants access, influence, the ability to move freely without restriction. She sees protocol as an obstacle, something outdated." She turned to face James. "But protocol is what keeps us from becoming just another wealthy family. It's what maintains the dignity of the institution. And when you refused to let her through that corridor, you were defending something much larger than yourself." James felt the weight of her words. "The medal I gave you at Sandringham," Anne continued. "Do you still have it?" "Yes, ma'am. I keep it with me always, because I want you to remember something. You did the right thing, and the fact that it caused controversy doesn't make it wrong." She started walking again, back toward the main corridor. "There will be more tests," she said. "More moments where you'll have to choose between pleasing people and following your duty. When those moments come, remember what my father used to say? The crown isn't about the person wearing it. It's about what that person represents." They reached the Queen's corridor. Anne gave him a final nod and walked away. James returned to his post, his mind clearer than it had been in months. That evening, news broke that shocked the nation. Queen Camilla had announced she was taking a step back from certain royal duties. The official statement cited health concerns and a desire for more privacy, but everyone understood what it really meant. The tensions had reached a breaking point. The king had made a choice. And while he couldn't change who he'd married, he could limit the damage to the institution. In the barracks, the guards discussed the news in hushed tones.
Hushed.
"Do you think it's because of what happened with Hartley?" one asked. It's bigger than that, another replied. But Hartley's stand was the first crack. The first time someone said no to her. After that, others found their courage. James listened, but said nothing. He didn't want credit. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to serve. Weeks later, Colonel Harrison visited Windsor. He found James in the training yard and pulled him aside. "Walk with me," Harrison said. They strolled through the castle gardens. "You've heard about Queen Camilla's reduced schedule," Harrison said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "What you probably haven't heard is that Princess Anne has been given expanded responsibilities. She's taking on patronages that were supposed to go to Camilla. She's representing the king at international events. She's essentially become the second most visible royal after the king himself." James wasn't sure how to respond. "The point is," Harrison continued, "the military made a choice when we supported you. We backed protocol over politics, and that choice has been vindicated." He stopped walking and faced. "James, you're being considered for promotion, Sergeant, with a special assignment to the Princess Royal's personal protection detail." James felt a surge of emotion. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll continue doing what you've been doing. Leading by example, showing others what it means to serve with integrity." "Yes, sir, absolutely." Harrison smiled. "Good. Because the princess specifically requested you. She said you're one of the few people in this entire circus who understands what really matters." The promotion came through 6 weeks later. Sergeant James Hartley, assigned to Princess Anne's protection detail. His first day in the new role, Anne called him into her office at Gadcombe Park, her private residence. "Sergeant Hartley," she said, "congratulations on your promotion." "Thank you, ma'am. I requested you for this position because I trust you. Not just to protect me physically, but to protect the values we both believe in." She gestured to a chair, and for the second time, James sat in the presence of a royal. "The monarchy is changing," Anne said. "My brother is trying to modernize, to make us relevant to a new generation, and I support that. But not at the cost of everything that makes us who we are." She leaned forward. "Your job isn't just to guard me. It's to help maintain standards. To show the younger guards what service looks like. To be a living reminder that duty comes before personality." "I understand, ma'am. I think you do. Better than most." Over the following months, James traveled with Princess Anne across the country and around the world. He saw her dedication firsthand. The early mornings, the endless handshakes, the genuine interest she showed in every person she met. He also saw the toll it took, the exhaustion she hid, the frustration with bureaucracy, the loneliness of being the hardest-working royal in a family that didn't always appreciate her efforts. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of engagements in Scotland, Anne spoke to him as they waited for the car. "Do you ever regret it, Sergeant? Standing your ground that day at Windsor?" James thought carefully before answering. "No, ma'am. I regret that it caused controversy. But I don't regret doing my duty." Anne nodded slowly. "Good answer. Because I don't regret supporting you. Even though it cost me politically, even though it widened the rift with my sister-in-law." She looked out at the Scottish countryside. "My father once told me that the greatest threat to the monarchy isn't abolitionists or Republicans. It's mediocrity. It's becoming so desperate to be liked that we forget to be worthy of respect." "He sounds like a wise man, ma'am. And he would have approved of you." The car arrived and they drove in comfortable silence back to the hotel. Years passed. James continued to serve Princess Anne. He was promoted again to warrant officer. His reputation within the guards became legendary. Not for anything dramatic, but for consistency. For unwavering dedication to duty. Young guards sought his advice. Officers trusted his judgment. And whenever someone asked about that day at Windsor, he gave the same answer. "I followed my orders." Nothing more, nothing less. But privately, he understood the truth. That day had been a turning point. Not just for him, but for the monarchy itself. It had been the moment when the military drew a line. When they chose institution over individual, when they reminded everyone that some things were non-negotiable. Queen Camilla eventually returned to some royal duties, but she never regained the influence she'd once sought. The king ruled within by his side more than his wife. The public noticed and largely approved. Princess Anne became the most beloved royal of her generation, not through charm or glamour, but through relentless, unglamorous work. Through showing up, through never asking for special treatment, and standing quietly in the background, protecting her, guiding younger guards, maintaining standards, was Sergeant Major James Hartley. On his last day of active service, 40 years after joining the Guards, Anne requested one final meeting. They met in the same library at Sandringham where she'd given him his father's medal. "You're retiring," Anne said. She was older now, in her 80s, but still sharp. "Yes, ma'am. It's time. You've given this institution your entire adult life. I hope you know how much that's meant. Serving has been my honor, ma'am." "Do you still have the medal?" James pulled it from his pocket. He'd carried it every day for 4 decades. "I want you to keep it," Anne said. "But I also want you to know something. That day at Windsor, when you refused to move for Camilla, but showed respect to me, you weren't just following orders. You were defending an idea. The idea that the monarchy serves the people, not the other way around." She stood and extended her hand. "Thank you, James, for your service, for your integrity, for showing the world what a true guard looks like." James shook her hand, tears in his eyes. "The honor was mine, ma'am." As he left Sandringham for the last time, James thought about that morning so many years ago. The morning he'd simply done his duty and inadvertently changed the course of royal history. He'd never sought recognition, never wanted to be a symbol. But in the end, that's exactly what he'd become. A reminder that in a world of politics and personalities, some people still chose principle. And sometimes, the smallest acts of integrity could move mountains. Even if all you did was refuse to move,